Hey everyone, welcome back to the next lesson. So in this one, we're going to continue building our, quiz project. And this one is going to be focusing on the quiz brain. So allow me to explain exactly what we're trying to achieve here. And one of the things I would just want to point out is that these things can get a little bit complicated, especially, one of the hardest things I've actually ever experienced is that when it comes to explaining object-oriented programming, when you're actually creating your own objects and classes, it's pretty easy to do. But when you're actually seeing someone explaining their creation process of writing code, writing class and stuff, that can get a little bit confusing. So I just want you to pay attention and make sure that you you follow through with me, because I don't want you to kind of pause the video and try to do it by yourself. Just want you to follow through. That's the best way to really understand this. So let's go ahead and get started. So one of the things we want to do right now, as we, obviously we created this main Pi code and the question model and everything. The next step is to actually create the quiz brain. So the idea with this is that this is basically the, brain of the quiz, which is going to ask questions and do a few other things. So let me actually, let me just get rid of these. So let's actually explain what we're trying to achieve here. So the first thing I want to do is I want to ask user questions. All right, so that's what I want to do. There you go. And then what we want to do is we want to check if the answer is correct. All right, so next one is we want to check if we are at the end of the question of the quiz. All right. All right, so that's one thing. These are three things we want to do, all right? So we want to ask the question and then check the answer is correct, if the answer is correct, and then we want to see if we are at the end of the quiz, because remember, we only have, a certain amount of questions, right? The number of questions. In this case, in the data file, we only have 12. So we also want to make sure that if we are at the end of it, we can end the quiz, right? So to do this, we're going to do a few things. We're going to first create a class called QuizBrain. So I'm just going to call it. I'm just taking notes here of what we're trying to achieve here. Let me actually get rid of that. There you go. So we're going to create a class called, QuizBrain. And this class is going to have a few things. So the first thing this class is going to have is attributes. Okay. So these attributes are actually, I apologize for my spelling. So these attributes are going to have a few things. So the first attribute is going to be question number. So the idea with this is that we want to actually keep a number, a number that we're going to add as we ask these questions. The reason actually is that, and the default value actually is going to be 0, by the way. So the idea with this is that the reason I want to do this is that we want to get into a situation. Here's what we're going to achieve. So when we run this quiz, we want people to get something like this: Q1, okay, equals and then this is a question, right? So and then we're going to have true and then false, and we want the user to just type their answer, whether it's true or false, right? So the idea with this is that the reason in order for us to do that, what we need is to actually keep track of these numbers. So that's why we want to have a the attribute. We want to have an attribute called question number, okay, and it's gonna start from 0, all right? And another attribute that we want to have is called question list, okay? And this is going to be basically a value that we're going to use to pass over the questions to the class. So if you remember, in the main Pi, we had this question bank, right? And what we need to do is we need to, have a value that we're going to actually pull these questions from the question bank into the quiz brain. So that's basically the idea behind the question list attribute, all right? So that's that. And also another thing that we want to have is a method. So this method is essentially going to be a very important one. It's going to be a method that we're going to use to ask the question. So we're going to call this next question method. All right. So the idea is that this is going to pull up the question from the list. Okay, from the list depending on the question number. okay? And depending on question number. Again, so the idea with this is that when we initialize the quiz brain, this is going to run immediately and ask the question, start basically running the program, right? So that's what we want to do. So again, these are some of the instructions. You know, we want to ask a question, we want to check the answer is correct, and we want to, you know, check if we are at the end of the quiz, which is going to be done by the next question, you know, a method. And then we have some attributes. One's going to be the question number, which is going to start from 0, and then question list, which is we're going to be pulling from the question bank, all right? And again, the idea is to just achieve something like this. So it's going to, you know, give us a number that says, hey, this is a question. It's going to ask us the question, and then the true, false, and then we're going to provide an answer. All right. So with that being said, let's actually start building this. And hopefully, you know, as I start building this, as I start writing this, you will see, you know, like everything's going to kind of come together and you're going to understand this a little bit better. All right. So I'm going to start by initializing our class. I'm going to actually, you know, create the class basically. So I'm just going to say class quiz brain. All right. So that's basically our class. And we're going to obviously use a constructor. So I'm just going to define init. All right. And just like that. So we initialize the class attributes. So now I'm going to actually start using, start creating these attributes, right? So question number. So I'm just going to say question self, question number. So that's going to be 0, right? So we're going to start with the default value of 0. And then we're going to have another attribute. We're going to call it question list. And this is going to be an attribute that this one is very important because we need to actually pull the value from the question bank, right? So this is what we're going to do. So for us to do this, we need to actually receive this value as an input when we actually initialize this class. This means that we need to actually ask this question or receive this input. So I'm just going to say question list right here, and we're going to just pull it right there, just like that. So we basically are asking for the, you know, when we are initializing this class, we're asking for this value, which is going to be the question bank, right? So just like that, we got our, you know, our attributes. Perfect. So next step is actually, again, this is basically what's going to happen. I just want to point this out. When we actually run this class, so for example, when we say, you know, in main.py, we're going to say quiz, you know, quiz equals quiz brain, for example, something like this. We're going to, for example, say quiz or like question bank. So something like this, we're going to run something like this. Again, the idea is that when we actually initialize this quiz brain class, we're going to be able to, you know, replace that question bank with that value. So again, that's like the whole point of it. Anyways, we'll get back to that later on. So anyways, so now we have our attributes, right? The next step is actually create the next question, which is like method, which is going to be asking the questions, right? That's like very important. So think about how we can do that. Obviously, this is a method, right? So it's going to be a function. So we're going to define a function called next question. And obviously, we're going to have it as self. And again, the idea is that to get a hold of the current question, right? So we're going to define a value or a variable called current question. All right. And I'm going to call this self and question list. So there you go. So guys, see what we're doing is that we're getting that, you know, again, this is the value we're going to be getting from the question bank, right? So we're calling, again, we're using question list, and we're going to use self and question number. So just like that, what is happening is that we're referring to this, right, to this question bank. And again, because again, this is a list, we can actually access the number inside. And just like that, we're going to, again, the question number is going to start from 0, right? So we're going to get the first question, right? So just like that, we're going to be getting the first question of this, you know, of this whole thing, right? The first question of this data, right? Of the list of questions that we have. So just like that, guys, I hope this makes sense, because again, this is a value. We just defined a variable, and then we, you know, we got the question list, right? and then we are accessing the first value inside, which is going to be 0 when we start, right? So again, if you remember, this is basically like, when we access a value inside a list, right? So just like that, we got the first question here. All right, perfect. Now what we're going to do is we're going to ask user a question. I'm just define a new value called user answer, okay? And I'm going to say input, and we want to obviously ask the question, and we want to achieve something like this. Remember, that's very, very important, right? So in order to do this, I'm going to actually obviously use an f string. That's very important. And then I'm going to say q, obviously, and then we want to ask the question number. All right, so again, we want to say self question number. I'm just going to copy this right here, and just like that. All right, and then colon, and we're going to say question text. That's another important thing. We're going to say current question. So let's actually do that. Current question, and we're going to say text. So this would be the question, text basically. And then we're going to have true or false. All right, just like that. So again, we refer to everything we need, and we ask the question. So just like that, again, guys, we got a value from user called user answer, and this is going to be an input, and we got this q in the beginning, which we have it right here. And then what we have here is basically the the self question number, which is going to be like this. Again, starts from 0, right? And then we got the current question text, which is going to be again the question that we're asking, right? And then obviously this is going to be the question, and then true or false, all that. So pretty simple. All right, so now let's go ahead and actually use this, okay, inside our main py. So I'm going to start by actually importing this. So I'm just going to say from QuizBrain, we're going to say import, and we're going to say import our class. So just like that, we imported our class. Now let's go ahead and actually build that object, right? So I'm just going to create that object called quiz equals QuizBrain. So this is our class, and we're going to import the question bank, right? So again, this is going to be the value we're importing into this class, right? Question bank. So that's basically the list of questions that we have, right? So just like that, we have our question bank, and everything's ready to go. And next thing I want to do is from this quiz object, I'm going to run the next question. There you go. So just like that, we have the next question. So basically, we're calling the next question and basically initializing the quiz using this. All right, so if I actually run this, take a look at this. If I run this, there you go, we're gonna get the first question. It says a slug's blood is green, true or false, and whatever, we can just put a value, and it's going to end. So there are a few problems with this right now, okay? First of all, the first problem is that this number is 0. We want it to be 1. So if you remember, if you go back here, I want this to be 1. So there is actually a way to do this, okay? And it's actually quite simple. In order to do this, what we want to do is we want to go here, and after the current question, okay, remember that there are a few ways. For example, we can actually just do a +1 here like this, right? That's one way of doing it, honestly, but I don't recommend it. One of the things that we can do is that we can actually just add 1 to the question number. So the reason that we want to do it this way is that, let me actually just question number, there you go, and we're going to say plus equal 1. Now the reason I want to do it like this is, now this, think about it. When we actually run through the first question, right, so we initialize this first question, we need to actually run the next question after, right? So in order to do this, right, we need to add 1. So we start from the 0, because if you remember Python lists, when you reference a list or index, it starts from 0, right? So this is what we did. We started from 0, but now when we run the first one, when we actually get the first value, we add 1 to it. So immediately we have 1, and then the next time that we run this thing again, because this is something that's going to run continuously, right? So the next time that we're going to run this, it's going to be starting from 1. That means that it's going to go to the next question, right? So now if I actually run this again, let's run this one more time. There you go. So see, we start with the 1, even though we're technically accessing the 0. So if I, for example, say true, and then there you go, that's where that's problem 1 solved. That's basically us fixing this number issue. Now the next video or the next lesson is where we actually start making sure that we actually run this value, because now so far we're just asking the question, but we're not receiving the values, or we're not doing anything with these values. And we also need to make sure that our quiz runs consistently until we are at the end of the quiz, right? That's another thing that we need to achieve. If you remember, we wanted to do it here. So that's another thing that we're going to do in the next lesson. But so far, we created our quiz brain and quiz method and all that stuff. So let me know if you have any questions, guys. So far, that's what we did. And again, we just created these methods, the method, and also these attributes to basically ask the first question. All right, guys, let me know if you have any questions. If not, I'll see you in the next one.